then why do we still deal with the consequences of it? If salvation is supposed to fix what was broken, why do we still live in a world affected by sin? What did Jesus' sacrifice actually reverse? Christianity teaches that Jesus' sacrifice did two key things. It removed the spiritual consequence of Adam and Eve's sin, separation from God. So before Jesus, sin created a barrier between humanity and God. Jesus' sacrifice allowed people to be reconciled with God if they accept it. 2, it defeated sin and death, but not immediately. Christians believe that full restoration will only happen at the end of time. Right now, believers are spiritually restored, but the world is still fallen. Why do we still face the consequences of sin? Even though Jesus' sacrifice restored the relationship with God, the physical and worldly effects of sin still exist. People still die, evil and suffering still happen, humans still struggle with sin. This is because, in Christian belief, God is working in stages. Jesus' first coming fixed the spiritual problem, reconnecting humans to God. Jesus' second coming will fix the world completely. No more sin, suffering, or death. Analogy, the cure for a disease. Imagine humanity has a disease. Jesus provides the cure, but the full healing process isn't instant. Right now, we live in the in-between stage. People who accept the cure are spiritually healed, but the world is still waiting for full restoration. So what changed after Jesus? Before Jesus, humanity was stuck in sin with no permanent way back to God. After Jesus, people can be saved, but the world itself is still fallen. Why didn't God just fix everything immediately? We already said this, because free will still exists. So in short, Jesus' sacrifice reversed the spiritual consequence of sin, but the full physical reversal hasn't happened yet.
So there you go. So that is a punishment then, because of what Adam did. Which brings me back to what I said, why would we be punished for what Adam did? But then at the same time not be punished for what our fathers did. If your dad can kill somebody and you won't be judged for it, and you wouldn't go to hell for murder, why would we why would we be spiritually separated from God because of what Adam did? We're different people. And they mention free will, right? So if everybody has free will,
people have a choice to accept salvation.
But if everybody has free will, that only emphasizes the fact that everybody should be judged individually, because we all make our own choices. If Adam had the free will to sin, that's what he chose to do with his free will. If I, using my free will, choose not to sin, then why would I suffer the consequence of being spiritually separated from God because of what he did? I wasn't born, right? I didn't even exist when that happened.
Question. Let's see what it says. That's a really strong question. If Adam had free will and chose to sin, and you have free will and choose not to sin, why should you still be spiritually separated from God because of his choice? Shouldn't everyone start with a clean slate?
Yeah.
Do we actually have the ability to never sin? In Christian belief, even if you personally never committed a major sin, the problem isn't just individual actions. It's that human nature itself is fallen because of Adam's choice. This means that even if you try to be good, you're still affected by a world shaped by sin. But you're still inclined to sin in some way. Christian theology teaches that no one, except Jesus, has ever lived without sin. Not because they were unfairly judged for Adam's sin, but because their very nature is weakened by it. So just as humans, it's not like you, it's just, this is how we are. Should Adam's choice affect you? Adam wasn't just an individual, he was the representation of humanity. Just like a leader's decision can affect an entire country, Adam's choice changed the state of human existence. However, Christianity also teaches that Jesus came as the new Adam, meaning that, the new Adam is from a Bible verse, meaning that just as Adam's choice brought sin into the world, Jesus' choice brought a way out.
Does that make sense to you?
Let me finish this most time. What if someone truly never sinned? If a person could live a sinless life, they wouldn't need salvation. But according to Christian theology, no one does. Not because of unfair judgment, but because all humans naturally fall short. That's why salvation isn't about just avoiding sin, but about being reconciled to God through Jesus, who lived the sinless life no one else could. What's the alternative view? Islam versus Christianity. In Islam, each person is born pure and isn't affected by Adam's sin. You only become sinful when you actually commit sins. In Christianity, you're born into a fallen world with a sinful nature, meaning that sin is inevitable, but Jesus provides a way to restore that relationship with God. Does this feel fair? If you think humans should be judged solely by their own choices, then the Islamic view might seem more fair. If you think humans are deeply affected by history, human nature, and the world around them, then the Christian view explains why no one is truly sinless on their own. Would it make more sense if original sin was seen as a corruption of human nature rather than an external punishment placed on you? Or does the whole idea still feel unjust?
Pasa, you see the part where it says, if you think humans are deeply affected by human history, human nature, and the world around them, then the Christian view explains why?
No, the Christian view would be up your alley. Like, if you're more of like a pessimist.
But
like,
what,
do I think everyone's born like pure and sinless, and they're gonna, okay, I'm born pure, but yeah, sure, I guess born pure and sinless. I don't know.
No. But what I'm trying to say is, it says if you think that humans are deeply affected by history, human nature, and the world around them, then that aligns with the Christian view. But that's not true. It doesn't say in Islam that humans aren't affected by those things. Which implies that you can only say humans are affected by those things if you believe we inherited some corrupted nature from what Adam did. But that's not the case. Like, we sin because we have free will, and we're not pure enough to use our free will to only do good deeds. But that again what does that have to do with Adam sinning?
Because he was the representative of humanity. He showed that we're capable and would fall victim to sin. Because we're not God. Only God can be sinless.
But so because of that, so there's two things. How does it make sense that he represents us? If we're all different, we all have
the first human.
And does that sound just to you? Like, if you think about being just and fair, one of the first rules of being just is don't blame a person for somebody else's actions. I'd say that's probably rule number one, right? If parents who have multiple children, what's one thing they always try and do? It's like, I will never punish Joshua for Michaela's mistakes, or I will never punish Riley for what Tyler did. But now and that's exactly what God does for everybody. Like, you'll never pay for your father's mistakes, but then suddenly that's thrown out the window for Adam.
So why don't you say, why does Adam have to be the representative of humanity, and why are we all affected by one person's choice? Like, basically, like, why?
I'm just gonna say, why is Adam the representative of humanity? Why should I bear any consequences for his actions if similarly I would never be judged for my father's sins? That's a completely fair challenge. Why is Adam... if every person is an individual, why should you inherit anything from Adam's sins? Especially when in human justice systems, you're not responsible for your father's crimes. Why is Adam considered the representative of humanity? Adam isn't just seen as the first human, he is seen as the head of humanity. In Christian theology, this is called federal headship, meaning that Adam was acting on behalf of the entire human race. The idea comes from Romans 5:12, just as sin entered the world through one man and death through sin, and in this way death came to all people because all sinned. So they don't answer why he's a representative, they just say he is. And doesn't, But you're asking why that should be the case? Okay, never mind. Here's a few ways people have tried to explain it. A genetic or environmental analogy, which we already went over. So you didn't personally cause those problems, but they shaped the world you were born into.
So Adam created, because of his sin, he thrusted us in a world where we could not be born pure anymore.
Yeah, but again, even if that's true, even if we say fine, that still doesn't explain why Jesus dying fixes that. Like, there's just so many layers as to why that doesn't make sense. For one, why should we be blamed for Adam? And if we say fine, we should, because he was my great grandfather. Then I still don't see how God killing himself makes God willing to forgive me. Right? Like, I get the analogy of, I get the concept of humans needed a perfect sacrifice, and the only perfect thing is God, so he sent himself down as the sacrifice.
So we wouldn't have to sacrifice anymore. Like, things. We wouldn't have to sacrifice anything, like living and breathing. All we would have to do is, like, live by his teachings. I guess sacrifice in the sense, like, money, all these other things that it says, like, give away your possessions and, like.
But that goes back to the analogy that I said, which is like, if you owe me $1,000 and you can't pay it because you don't have $1,000, then it's not any more helpful to me that I give you $1,000 so you can give it right back, because that's what's happening. And then on top of that, actually, if you were to
ask that question,
if you were to add in the component, if you were to add in the part of like let's say actually your dad owes me $1,000.
My dad.
Your dad owes me $1,000, and then I say, well, it's your dad, so, and he's long gone. Like, you have to give me $1,000 now, and then you say I can't pay you $1,000, and then I say, okay, I'll find my own $1,000 and I'll give it to you, and then you can give it back to me. You didn't end up paying, and you didn't end up making any sacrifices. And then I didn't end up gaining $1,000 because it came from me. I found it myself. It came from me. And then on top of that, you shouldn't have even had to pay me $1,000 because your dad is the one that owed me $1,000. Right? So your dad owing me $1,000 is the equivalent of you having to pay for Adam's sin. And then me finding my own $1,000 to give it to you, just to give it right back to me, is the same as as God giving his own son onto earth just for him to kill himself as a sacrifice. So it's like he provided his own sacrifice. So humans didn't end up doing anything. And that's, so this doesn't really make sense. Trippy, right? But all these problems go away if you just think we never even inherited any sin. Adam sinned, that's great for him. Sucks to be Adam.
Yeah.
And that's how the world started, but that doesn't mean that I'm in a state of sin. All those problems go away. They also go away if you also just say, like, Jesus wasn't the Son of God. There wasn't some crazy sacrifice. God didn't expect a sacrifice because we didn't sin, and Jesus wasn't the Son of God. He was just a prophet. Like, he was crucified because everybody hated him, right? Because he spoke blasphemy constantly. That's why he was crucified.
Yeah.
That makes way more sense. Instead of this whole how many questions did we have to come in just to start for it to make a little bit more sense? But it only started to make sense because then it started speaking more about how it was like a sign of like love, basically. But when we were asking questions about how that logically makes sense as a just and like meaningful sacrifice, that's when we were like, how, right? Because the first question was, God couldn't just say, even though Adam sinned, I'll let it go. because he's fair and he's just. So if Adam sinned, he needs, quote unquote compensation. So that means a sacrifice has to be made, and that sacrifice has to be perfect, and the only thing perfect is God. But that when it's about that's when it's like, how that doesn't make sense. The only time it started to make sense is when we were like, it does show a lot of love. Yeah, it shows a lot of love that God was willing to die for us. I do agree. It shows that He loves us.
Like He realized there was no sacrifice that would work besides like His own. So He helped humans out by sacrificing Himself in human form.
Right, but.
And if people bought into that, if people said, "Oh my God, like I cannot believe the sacrifice that God made for me," showing like he whatever, like he put Himself in human form, and the human form of Himself was sacrificed to like God, right? And if I believe that that Jesus, God, did the greatest sacrifice, then that's like good enough for humans to like to be saved, if they believe that God did that for us.
Yeah.
Gave us the opportunity to be able to reconcile that relationship.
Yeah. As a sign of love to inspire us to be better, I think sure that could make sense. It's inspiring that He killed Himself for us. But going back to the whole premise of that not only is it just an inspirational act, but it's also like the most fair and logical act. That's when it's like, I don't get that then.
The fair and logical act, because there's nothing else that could be sacrificed.
But is that logical?
Yeah, like because it's God. It's the only thing. That's the only entity that would be sinless. No human, no animal, nothing would be able to match God.
But that goes back to the question that we originally asked, which was, how come God punished us for sin that we didn't commit, and in order to reconcile that, He sent Himself down to kill Himself so that He Himself could forgive us?
Did He punish us, or did like Adam make drew like the line in the sand for humans and humanity from God?
Well,
like,
God
gave him free will, and he chose to disobey.
But God's the one that sets punishments. So ultimately, after Adam acted, God's the one. If we go off of Christian theology, God's the one that said, "Okay, because you did this, I'm gonna separate humans from me."
So then, how do Jews then look at it? Do they look at it as like there's like how's their salvation done then?
I'm not sure. Ask. I don't even know if Jews believe in original sin.
No.
They don't?
While Jews' teachings acknowledge that Adam and Eve sinned by eating from the tree of knowledge, the consequences of their sin are not seen as something inherited by all humanity in the same way Christianity teaches. Yeah, what do Jews believe about Adam and Eve's sin? Adam and Eve disobeyed God, and their punishment was expulsion from the Garden of Eden, as well as mortality. However, Judaism does not teach that their sin permanently corrupted human nature, or that all humans are automatically guilty because of it. Instead, people are born morally neutral, with the ability to choose good or evil. Do Jews believe sin is passed down? No. Each person is responsible only for their own sins. Humans are not born sinful, but they do have the free will to do good or bad, and then repentance is always available. People can ask God for forgiveness directly without needing a savior. So why did Christianity develop the idea of original sin? The concept of original sin was developed mainly by St. Augustine in the 4th century, based on passages like Romans. Christianity sees Adam as the representative of humanity, meaning the sin affected all humans. Judaism never developed this belief because it sees sin as an individual choice, not something inherited. And then it says, what about Islam? Same thing. Rejects original sin, teaches that humans are born pure. Adam and Eve made a mistake, but they repented and God forgave them. Every human is responsible for their own actions, not Adam's. Which view makes more sense? And then it says, if you believe sin is something that affects all humans from birth, the Christian view probably make more sense. If you believe that each person starts with a clean slate, Jewish and Islamic views make more sense, I guess. So there you go. It's just, if you don't believe in that, then
How are you feeling right now? What are you thinking after this deep and long conversation and research?
I don't know. I'm kind of conflicted because of, like, yeah, I do agree with this sense, like, why am I screwed because of one schmuck? why like, what, like, you know what I mean? And even like that country thing, by the way, like that country analogy also is kind of stupid. It's like, yeah, okay, you can have Donald Trump. Remember, it's like well, it said like a leader of a country makes choices that affects everyone, or that affects everyone in the country or whatever, right? But if that leader's a dick, like, Nazi Germany, not everyone was a Nazi that lived in Germany. A lot of them were, but not everybody.
Yeah, and then on top of that,
like, you're attributed to them. It's like immediately, oh, you're from Germany, oh, you must be a Nazi right away.
Yeah, exactly.
That's not fair. I don't like him. It's like, well, no, you are.
It's not fair. On top of the fact that at least the people in a voting government at least vote for them. So even then it's like that could maybe you could find an argument there to blame the people, but that's like the best argument there could be, and nobody even voted for Adam to be the representative, right? It's like that would be the one argument where it's like, it's true, he's not you, but you did vote for him, so since the president fucked me over, I'm gonna blame everyone in the country. Like that, that still isn't fair, but at least there's an argument that since we voted for him, we kind of have to take responsibility. Whereas we didn't even vote for Adam, so the one maybe argument that there is, it doesn't even exist.
I think in order for me to like go over the edge, I'd have to do more than just like ChatGPTing it. I'd have to like probably want to talk to an actual human about it, like a priest or something, just to see what they would say.
Yeah. And
get their opinion. And maybe they would have a more I don't know, probably not, but let's say that maybe they would have like a more, like a better explanation of it, where then it would make sense to me, or they can explain it better, or maybe there's information that this isn't telling us or something. Yeah. I can't say like ChatGPT's not an expert. I'm not an expert, obviously, in Christianity, so I'd have to probably speak with a priest. But if I spoke with a priest, or let's say I spoke with like more than one, say I spoke with like 2 or 3, and I all felt the same way about all 3, like the way I feel like right now, where I'm like, I don't know, like the other side makes sense, where like you shouldn't, like I don't think you should be judged like off rip. Then yeah, you could probably have a way better idea of where you want to go with your life. Not you, but just like in general, you would have a way better idea of where you want to go with your life if you think Christianity is the way to go. It's like, do you just accept that and be like, okay, I guess all people are born with original sin, or born with sin, and because of Adam's choice, and we're saved by Jesus' sacrifice, and all I have to do is just extend my hand out to Jesus and he'll help me? Do I just accept that as that's the reality of the situation, or do I say, nah, fuck that, I'm gonna go to another place that I think makes more sense? It's like, do you just accept it as that's the way it is? Like we were just screwed, and because humans are naturally flawed. Like no human will not go without a sin in their life, that's why you can look at it like that. It's like, there's no fucking way no one's not going to sin once in their life. Like,
no,
really?
Of course.
So thinking about it like that, it's like, yeah, like it's not fair that I'm like judged off rip, but like in reality, yeah, I'm gonna sin. I'm a human. Every human sins, but the only person who didn't sin was Jesus, which was God in human form. So, do I think it's fair that I'm judged about it from off rip? No, but at the same time, I look at it as if I was gonna sin anyway, just because that's what humans are. Like, we're gonna sin, regardless of whether we're judged for it right off the bat or not. We're gonna be sinners.
I agree. I completely agree. Everybody's gonna sin.
Yeah.
No human has never not sinned, I guess, except for quote unquote Jesus. But that doesn't. That still doesn't. That's like a whole separate issue as to, like, that's one side of like that's one fact, but that still doesn't explain how Jesus dying like reprimands any of that or like fixes any of that. It doesn't explain how just because I am going to sin, that means that humanity should have been cut off from God because of Adam. Like those things still aren't explained. I agree that all humans will sin, and that's a separate issue. And then the fact that we technically suffered consequences because of Adam until Jesus sacrificed himself is a whole different issue that I just don't see how that makes sense. And I also, again, I don't see how Jesus dying even solves that problem, because Jesus is God. If God had the issue with humans, how does killing himself solve anything? Going back to the analogy of like how you owe me money, it doesn't solve anything. It, at best, like I said, it can be seen as like an inspirational act to be like, guys, just please, like just don't sin, like just be better. In that sense, I can understand it, but that's always not where it didn't stop there. It always added like because that's the only sacrifice that makes everything fair, and that's where it's like no.
But it can also perhaps like Adam disobeyed God because perhaps like obviously we didn't say this, but I'm thinking like maybe Adam disobeyed God because he was again tempted by sin, and he thought sin would be a better thing to do, whatever the sin is, than to follow God's rules.
Yeah, I'm sure that's how he felt.
So probably with like human nature and stuff, it's way easier to sin, and to like do like these like sacrifices and stuff, right? Humans may think like, oh, like it's like, like I can't sacrifice all these things or whatever. So like God just said, because he loves us so much, like we said before, he's like, fine, I understand you guys can't do it. I'm gonna come down, sacrifice, do the human sacrifice for you guys, and if you can, and I'm showing you how much I want to reconcile this relationship. If you can see how much effort I'm putting in by sacrificing myself in human form, then hopefully you'll listen to me, and you'll turn away from sin, because you can see, wow, I can't believe God all powerful and all whatever, killed himself in human form to reconcile a relationship with us, because sin is so much easier to do than to follow biblical rules. So if I can see the effort that he put in order to mend the relationship, I'm just gonna, if I was like super Catholic, then I would think like, wow, I can't believe that. Okay, I'm gonna listen to the teachings and stuff, and I'm gonna follow his rules because he did so much in order to fix our relationship, because I was gonna sin anyway. The difference with Islam and Judaism is like, oh, you're born pure. It's like, yeah, okay, cool, but by like age whatever, you're gonna sin. So it's like, okay, you're gonna sin anyway. So the only difference is in Catholicism, it's like they don't give you that fucking couple year gap where you're not gonna sin because you can't do anything. They're just like, you're gonna sin.
No. That's not the biggest difference in my opinion.
What? That
part's irrelevant actually. It comes down to the part about Jesus. That's the part.
Well,
by not being born in a state of sin, that invalidates everything that Jesus did. Or in other words, to say that none of that was some spiritual crazy God act of repentance.
But do you think humans will always sin?
Yes, which actually only invalidates Jesus dying. Because if he sinned for us to be closer to God. If he sacrificed himself for us to be closer to God and fix the world, but we still sin, it didn't do much. But like ChatGPT said, it wasn't so that we don't sin. It was actually just to fix the issue of us being separated from God.
Yes.
Right? That was the point. Adam died. That separated
because
humans from God.
There had to be a just sacrifice, and the only sacrifice that was possible to mend the relationship was
to kill himself.
A human form of God to die.
So he brought
Which is kind of morbid if you think about it.
But yeah, anyways, all in all, that's kind of like good conversation. But that all in all, that's kind of why that dragons used to exist. But it's like, do we know if that's true or not?
Yeah.
Or some guy could have written in the past, my friend Billy killed 1,000 people, and then we read it in 2025 and we're like, holy crap, there was some serial killer in 300 BC that killed 1,000 people. How do we know if that's true or not?
So does the Quran think that all the stuff Jesus did didn't happen? They get a prophet with godlike powers?
What Muslims believe is that a lot of what's in the scriptures is true, but a lot of it has also been corrupted, for the reason that I just said. Because it's like there wasn't a system in place to verify everything. So going back to what I just said, it's like, what if one of the thing, like if some guy wrote in 300 BC, there was a serial killer that killed 1,000 people. He was like the worst villain in history. How do we know that guy actually existed? We don't. We're just reading some like script of a guy that wrote about it, but we don't know if it's true or not. And the same is kind of true about the Bible. Like, it was written by a bunch of people. We don't know how much is true. And let's just say we assumed that the original thing written was all true. Let's just say like the pieces of paper that were collected after, like, let's say 50 years or however long after Jesus died, and where the disciples were writing about Jesus, even if we assume all of it is true, we can't assume that what we're reading today was even the original stuff that was written, because how has it been preserved? Like, what proofs do we have that it's been preserved? The difference with the Quran is that when Muhammad came and like revealed all the things that he claimed God revealed to him, a bunch of people around him started writing it down on paper, right? Kind of like how people started writing down what Jesus did in the New Testament. Like, that formed the New Testament. So similarly, Muhammad's companions were like, oh, he just said this from God. Okay, let me write this down. That ends up being, whatever, verse 20 of the Quran. And then after they wrote it down, they would get a bunch of people to memorize it, like word for word. And then they would get more people to memorize it. So when they died, there were still a bunch of people that knew it. And then they got other people to memorize it. And then when they died, there were still people that knew it, word for word, until eventually you climb up the generations and everybody still knew it word for word.
You don't think broken telephone happened?
So that's possible. But let's just say broken telephone did happen. That's still one thing in place that makes it more reputable than like the Bible, for example. Because the Bible never did that. They just wrote it down, and then it's like we have to assume that every time it was rewritten, like hopefully it was trustworthy. But at least in the Quran, they made a notable effort into memorizing it. And it's true, maybe they played broken telephone. So then another thing that they did was every time starting from Muhammad, they taught somebody else all the words. They wrote down that person's name and their attributes and who they knew and if they were a trustworthy person and if they were forgetful, and they wrote them down in a book of being one of the narrators. And then when they taught somebody, they wrote down their name and said, okay, this person is also trustworthy, he's never lied, blah, blah, blah. And if somebody memorized something about the Quran or a detail about Muhammad, and they were and people knew them for having a bad memory, or they lied before, then they wouldn't count that as a valid person to write in one of the chains of all the narrators. And I'm not saying like these things are foolproof or whatever, but it's like, but the reason I brought this up is because if we assume that the New Testament is like proof of that Jesus performed miracles, then equally we kind of have to believe the Quran, because it's at the very least even more trustworthy than the New Testament.
I want to say, why don't Christians, like, it's kind of a stupid question, but why don't Christians believe in Islam? Like, what don't they believe in Islam?
They don't believe in Muhammad.
That he didn't exist?
No, they don't believe that he was a prophet. They just believe he was a guy that claimed to be a prophet, but he's not.
Like he was like a fraud?
Yeah.
Yeah, like you just said, Muhammad is the final prophet for Islam, who received the ultimate revelation from God. Christians do not accept Muhammad as a prophet because they believe Jesus' message was final and no further revelation was necessary. Christians do not believe the Quran is God's word. The Quran for Islam is the direct, unaltered word of God revealed to Muhammad. Christianity believes the Bible, Old and New Testament, is God's revelation. They do not see the Quran as divinely inspired. Christians do not believe that Jesus was just a prophet. So Islam thinks Jesus performed miracles but was not divine.
Yeah.
Christianity, Jesus the Son of God, fully divine, central salvation. Christians do not believe that Jesus was only rescued from the cross. Islam, Jesus was not crucified.
Yeah, that's another thing. They don't believe Jesus died. They believed he was, like, a person that looked like him was the one. So, so you know how Jesus was killed and then resurrected?
Yeah.
They don't think he ever died. Like, he wasn't dead. That's why he was able to come back, because he was never dead. Somebody else that looked like him was.
Yeah, they said
was the one
possibly
that was
Judas was made to look like him. Yeah, and the Christianity, the crucifixion is the foundation of Christian belief. Jesus died for humanity's sins and resurrected. Christians do not accept that salvation comes only from good deeds. Islam, salvation is based on faith in God plus good deeds. On Judgment Day, good and bad deeds will be weighed. Christianity, while good deeds matter, salvation is ultimately through grace and faith in Jesus, not personal merit.
So, yeah.
Christians do not believe that God is strictly one in a Unitarian sense. God, Allah, is absolutely one. He has no partners, no sons, no divisions. Christianity believes in one God in three persons, the Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Christians do not pray like Muslims or follow Islamic. Okay, no shit. Muslims pray 5 times a day. Yeah, fast Ramadan, blah, blah, blah. Christians pray freely, no set number of times, and do not follow Islamic legal codes. I love how it asks this at the end. What religion's view seems more convincing to you? If you believe in strict monotheism, Islam's view may seem more logical. If you believe Jesus is divine and salvation is through him, Christianity's view makes sense. Does one perspective seem stronger to you, or do you still have doubts about certain parts?
But
Islam seems way more strict.
Strict?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is more. There are more, like, rules.
Bun that, bro. Bun that.
But yeah, I brought up the whole Quran thing and, like, chain of narrators because you said, well, like, didn't they write about how Jesus performed a bunch of miracles?
Mm-hmm.
And then so that's why I was responding with that. Like, yeah, they did, but for one, like, how trustworthy is that? Two, even if they did, they wrote about the same thing they wrote the same things about Muhammad, how Muhammad performed miracles. So if performing miracles makes the Bible true, then performing miracles would also make the Quran true. And between the two, the Quran is more verifiable than the Bible. So that would make the Quran even more true than the Bible. Because at least you can somewhat, or, you know, scholars believe strongly, like, verify the fact that it's true. Whereas the Bible, there isn't quite like it's not quite as verifiable. And even if they're equally verifiable, then like I said, if accounts of performing miracles deems it to be true, like the word of God or not, then the Quran would have to be that too.
Or you just believe that all this stuff is hooey, and no one did any of these things.
Yeah. Well, I just mean
as well. If you want it to be that way.
For the person that does believe, I'm saying it would make sense to not believe in Jesus based on what we just said. I mean, just read, like the complete, like, mental gymnastics that we just read.
Yeah.
Like, that was some really strong mental gymnastics, and usually not even answering the core of the question. And then on top of the fact that it's like, you know, if one thing is if miracles are what made Jesus God, then you kind of have to say the same thing about Muhammad. Or third option is, like you said, don't believe any of them.
Yeah.
But which leads me back to the whole beginning of this conversation of why I don't think I could become Christian again. It's because of how this whole conversation went. It was just a bunch of like mental gymnastics to think that Jesus was God.
I think if this matters to you a lot, which it seems like it does, I think you should have an actual conversation with a priest before you like fully say no. To be honest, it's.
Well,
a very
I've had
important
these
call.
I've had these conversations when I did go. I did have these conversations with whoever, like religion teachers, mostly with religion teachers.
But not with priests.
I maybe a couple times with priests. I can't quite remember. A few. And at the end of the day, it's really trippy to think about, but the answers given by ChatGPT are often as strong or better than what most like teachers have to say. That's one reason why I've actually been going to ChatGPT, because I remember the conversations that I would have with all these people that are quote unquote knowledgeable, and they gave me the same or worse answers than ChatGPT.
Well, R.I.P. then, eh?
Yeah.
Oh, I want to show you this real quick. You probably maybe you've seen this before. Tell me if